Select Committee Chairman, Sir Stephen Timms.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I apologise for my late arrival in the debate. It is striking, Mr Deputy Speaker, how hard it is for Conservative Chancellors to resist the temptation to hand out big tax cuts to the wealthiest while raising tax for ordinary people. And you can sympathise with the Chancellor. He meets many such people, many people amongst the 1% wealthiest pension savers in the country. They're very courteous, they're very nice to him. Over convivial dinners, they explain their frustrations with the government's pensions tax policy. And, you know, these are good eggs. Who could possibly begrudge them a £1.2 billion tax cut? But the reality, Mr Deputy Speaker, is that pensions tax relief is already massively skewed in favour of the best off, and the Chancellor, when times are hard, has decided to give another £1 billion to the wealthiest in pensions tax relief. I do welcome adoption of the Select Committee recommendations on support in universal credit for the costs of childcare that was announced yesterday, allowing for the costs, as the Secretary of State explained, to be paid up front from universal credit, lifting the cap, which absurdly hadn't been raised since 2005. That will remove very important barriers to work and a barrier to those who are working part-time from working full-time. And there's much to welcome in the Health and Disability White Paper. The White Paper says the system will be changed so that it focuses on what people can do rather than what they can't do. That is laudable, although precisely the same form of words was used by Alistair Darling introducing changes to the incapacity benefit system 25 years ago. Whether or not the detail turns out to be a good thing will depend on the detail, and the details are largely absent. The Secretary of State spoke about consultation. The government's ill-fated disability strategy came to grief in the courts because the government did not consult disabled people adequately. We must very much hope that that lesson has now been learned. Nobody will mourn the work capability assessment. The White Paper says it will be replaced by, quote, a new personalised health conditionality approach. I wonder if ministers can tell us what that means. It goes on in the White Paper to explain it, quote, will provide more personalised levels of conditionality and employment support. I'm afraid we're none the wiser. And that is the problem here, that despite being years late, a lot of the vital, detailed work doesn't seem yet to have been done. I do welcome some of the specific proposals to reform PIP. I'm pleased that the call to match people's primary health condition with a specialist assessor is at least going to be tested. A lot of PIP assessments come up, we know, with the wrong answer. We know that because when people appeal against the determination, the great majority win their appeal, and the proportion who does so has been going up. The White Paper proposes to place more weight on the PIP assessment in future, so it's even more important that we get it right. I think the only way to do that is to record all the assessments, so that if it is subsequently found that the decision was wrong, it's possible to go back and work out why and consider how to avoid the same mistake being made again in the future. The White Paper says there will be an increase in recording. That's a good thing. But the Select Committee proposed 5 years ago all of them should be recorded with an opt-out for the claimant if the claimant doesn't want it recorded. The Department should instruct providers in the new contracts for assessments to be agreed this year to record assessments by default with a clear opt-out option. And that is a proposition which is supported by all three of the assessment providers at the moment. It will ensure there's an objective record of the assessment, reassuring claimants, allowing assessment quality to be audited. When recordings are available and the findings of assessments are overturned, the recordings should be checked, at least on a sampled basis, to see whether the erroneous outcome could have been avoided. I welcome the commitment in the White Paper to test the feasibility of sending a copy of the assessor's report to claimants automatically before the decision is made. That was also recommended by the committee 5 years ago. I hope the feasibility testing will be brief so that it can be introduced across the system very soon. It's disappointing, I think, that there still isn't a target for disability employment in the White Paper. The government congratulates itself on achieving the previous very undemanding target early. But I am pleased that it says that, quote, our goal to reduce the disability employment gap remains. In the 2015 election campaign, David Cameron announced a target to halve the disability employment gap. Unfortunately, that target was quickly scrapped as soon as the general election was out of the way. I do hope that a clear target around disability employment gap will now be adopted. A lot's going to depend on the support disabled people receive from work coaches. Polling by the charity Scope found that half of job seekers with complex disabilities don't currently feel supported by work coaches. The initial training for work coaches doesn't seem to cover the barriers to work faced by disabled people. And job centres lack specialist assistive technology, which many disabled people need to look for and apply for work. The White Paper refers to the potential in the UK Shared Prosperity Fund to provide employment support. It is very disappointing that there will be, I think, a 2-year gap between the European Social Fund ending and the UK Shared Prosperity Fund being allowed to support employment projects. A witness to the Select Committee yesterday suggested that the Flexible Support Fund might be expanded, at least temporarily, to try and bridge that gap. That could lead to a large amount of very important employment support capacity not being lost, which it will be if the gap is allowed to take effect. Can I lastly, Mr Deputy Speaker, appeal to the Secretary of State to spare us the embarrassment of the Department appealing against the ruling this week by the Information Commissioner that the Department's research on the impact of benefit sanctions must be published. The Department promised to publish it. His predecessor, as was her wont, decided to hide as much as possible if it contained any hint of a question mark about the Department's policies. I welcome the review, which I think he's making of that approach, and I do hope he will show with this particular case that things have now changed.
Theresa Villiers.